Imagine a vibrant discussion between people that includes both openness and critical thought in the pursuit of truth. The Purchasing Truth podcast is an experience, a journey, an exploration of the impact that negative messages in politics and the media have on our families, community, society, and nation. Join your hosts, Bill Stierle and Tom to discover new concepts and language strategies that will reveal effective ways of establishing truth. This podcast series will tackle current events, leadership challenges, healthcare confusion, integrity in business, and many other areas that affect us all. Gain clarity and understanding of the various truth perspectives. Welcome to Purchasing Truth.
Welcome back to Purchasing Truth. I'm Tom Hazard, along with your host, Bill Stierle. And you know, Bill, today we're going to talk about something that needs to be talked about, and it sort of is present in all of our episodes in some ways, but I think it's important to really address it. Do the words we speak really matter? And it's a big topic, but boy, it does sure seems like a lot of the words many of us are speaking don't matter.
Yeah, this is really a tough one, Tom. And I know that we can do several episodes around truth regarding this. And because this is a conflict resolution communication show for both business and politics and personal lives and how we exist as a human being, really understanding how to grapple with, wrestle with, struggle with the perception, concept, and reality of words making a difference is really an important thing in our current day and age, because truth is, in the ears of the beholder, and it's unsettling just to even say that. Right?
It's unsettling to hear it too.
I mean, truth's in the ear of the beholder. If the beholder believes as the Taliban does, then their ears are hearing it through that filter. If it's hearing from the government that was there, that was being supported by the US, then it was going to be, there in that space, and the urgency, and a lot of times human beings work better under crisis anyways, by the way, is that, if you had a better plan for your future, Tom, would you take it?
If I had a better plan for a better future, yeah, I might.
Yeah, you might, but do you? Right? I mean,
do you always take action with that plan?
Right.
Yeah, different question. Okay,
different question, but it's like in that neighborhood, it's like, if I don't know what I can't, if I'm not speaking and thinking in the way of that, then it's really hard for me to live into it. I have to use our words do matters, because our words are kind of influencing our things, kind of like thoughts, and thoughts influence our physiology, and our physiology influences our actions. So we need to think again and facilitate our way into picking better words. Think again. What's my next better thought? What do I need next is a really important question. What would make my life wonderful is really important question, because it keeps us in front of what maybe our highest ideal is, instead of our limiting belief that the words are that are in my head, that are influencing our perspective and our perception.
For sure. Well, you mentioned the Taliban. Let's just discuss that briefly. I don't want to go down a huge rabbit hole, because, we could spend a bunch of episodes just talking about what's going on in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
But, the one example of that supports words matter is the fact that when it became clear the Taliban took over Afghanistan and the government that the US put in place just rolled over, collapsed, the leader left the country. The Republican National, Party took off of their website information and language words about touting the negotiation that President Trump had done with the Taliban to bring this 2-decade-old war to an end.
Yes.
felt, I would imagine, that those words might hurt them and they matter in that way. Therefore,
Right.
let's take them off our website. And we're not really going to talk about that we negotiated the end of this thing.
Yeah, I just want the way that messaging works is I just want the smallest people to remember the smallest thing, not to investigate the bigger issue. So I negotiated I put it in the place and they couldn't do anything about it. I just, if I would have stayed there, I could have won with the Taliban, but I didn't want to kill a million people. So those are all sentences that meet the need for respect, but also create the alternative message that, yeah, I could have did something, but I chose not to because I'm a good guy. So words do matter. I mean, it does, and there is kind of a truth to it, and it is true, but it's also kind of, I don't know, let's call it a human rights problem, or a compassion problem, or even an optics problem of you go in and you do something that causes a lot of death and loss or money. And, it's just not going to look good, to the general voting public. You want to take it only as far as you can, and then you want to stretch it a little further than that. And that's a little bit of the environment that we're in. It's what does it take to win, not what does it take to be right, or what does it take to be truthful. Truthful and right are behind winning.
Or what does it take to be compassionate? Or what does it take to make sure, we don't abandon women and children? I mean, there's all sorts of things there. And what the other sort of flip side of the Republican Party taking language off their website, I thought was interesting, seeing President Biden this week take ownership of the exit from Afghanistan, saying, hey, the buck stops with me. I mean, when it's sort of been a long time since we've had a president take responsibility for his actions and own it.
Yeah, and own it. It says this was not, I wasn't asking the right questions. I wasn't focusing fully on this. I was trusting others to do it. I did not give them enough power. I did not give them enough money. I did not make those things available. And it's really actually kind of hard about that, because if he starts doing that decision making when he comes into office, January, after the swearing in ceremony, when he comes in, that the first thing he does is allocate money for the withdrawal of Afghanistan's, that people's heads swirl and it becomes red meat for the opposition. Words matter, actions matter. He didn't pick that first. He picked the pandemic first. He picked vaccines first. We're just doing one thing. In fact, it was really kind of a little stunning. What is President Biden going to do about transgender? He goes, hey, he's focusing on the pandemic, back off. It's like, he's not doing that one. That's not on the top of the list. The top of the list is pandemic, vaccination.
And the reality, of course, is that the Trump administration set the timetable for this withdrawal from Afghanistan for May of 2021.
Correct.
And sadly, had Biden let that date stand and all this craziness happens, it's much easier to say, well, we were stuck with that agreement by the previous administration. This is on Trump's hands. But because he extended it several months, and then this exit is still tragically
so problematic,
not well done, you think, well, why'd you extend it? Didn't you plan during this time? So that's unfortunate. Okay.
Tom, here's why words make a difference. Why words make a difference is we're talking about the truth of the mistakes that the Biden administration made in the messaging and the images. Because if Biden would have came out at the beginning and said, This is going to, I want everybody to know at the start of this is going to be really, really messy. And we were really focusing on the pandemic. We were not focusing on this. We are making our next best efforts as I have pivoted and chose to pivot towards now working towards Afghanistan. All of those pictures would have already been preset, but he didn't say that. He says, the government is not going to fall. We have time to get out. We're dealing with the issue sentence. All the Americans will get out. He was giving a Trumpian message of reassurance. I just compared Biden to Trump.
You sure did. Yeah. Yeah. He
did. He was, so the roses,
he was setting a rosy scenario vision.
Oh, yes. And luckily, it's not that adults can't do that and pivot. I don't know, Tom, have you ever made something lighter for your kids before you brought them the bad news, a week or two later? Of course, yeah. You're going to say, hey, listen, I think we can get to Disneyland in 2 weeks. And then when 2 weeks comes out, you know what? I've got some bad news. We can't go this month. It needs to be in 2 more months. And the kids going like, what? It's like, so that's why words make a difference, is that can you be in truth and integrity all the time? Or is our natural tendency to be optimistic, be positive, be rosy colored glasses, to talk about things? And there's several things I can give former President Trump a pass on by him saying something to be optimistic and supportive to calm people down, but also going, dude, you went too far, or you went too little. And I kind of wouldn't see why you gave the rosy message, but not the strongest language play. So our words do make a difference. And
yeah. Well, so let's take another example of where I think words make a difference, and some of the consequences of certain types of words and how they make a difference. And we mentioned, I think, briefly in a past episode, maybe a month ago, about Phil Valentine, who's a conservative radio show host. And he was very vocal, not being very supportive of the vaccine. And it wasn't that he was completely anti-vax. It was just that he was, being his opinion of it.
He picked the promotional edge. He picked the edge that his audience wants to listen to. That's what he did. He picked the edge. He said, hey, I got to be on one side or the other. I'm picking this thing. I'm going to write a mockery song about vaccines, and it's going to be catchy, and I'm going to get a lot of hits, a lot of plays, a lot of viral. Probably right now, we could go on YouTube and see how many listens or views that video has gotten. And that's called range of influence, right? The range of influence is because that's where his advertisers were looking to pay him.
Yeah, because he gets a lot of ears listening to his radio show, a lot of eyeballs on his videos.
Yes. So
and that's of interest.
That is of interest to an advertiser. So there is a real dollar at making up something. There's a real dollar in doing it.
Well, and the real impact of his words were that, for example, he was very vocal in saying he wasn't going to get the vaccine, and he thought he had about a 1% chance of catching COVID. Now, those words to me are problematic on their face, because what does a 1% chance mean? You have a chance of getting COVID from 1 out of every 100 people you come in contact with? Or, it's interesting to think about what that word means, but it's certainly proportionalized it to say, oh, there's a very low chance of me getting COVID. And then, of course, he gets COVID, and about a month ago from when we're recording this, he ends up in the hospital, so severely sick. He immediately may be too strong a word, but he very quickly realized, whoa, my words do have an impact, and I need to come out and tell people they should get the vaccine because they don't want this experience that I'm having in the hospital.
Right. And there are people that, are seeing the impact now. Does his words make a difference now that he's passed? Will society weight those words at or more than the song, the vaccination song?
I don't know that it will. I think more people probably heard the song or saw the video because it was controversial at the time and it got a lot of attention because of that. Probably more people saw it and more people's beliefs were solidified in not getting the vaccine, or people that may have been on the fence were like, yeah, I guess I'm not going to get the vaccine, because he said, hey, there's such a little chance of getting it. And he was casting doubt and skepticism on the vaccine. And that played into, his conservative audience biases.
Right.
And so those words were very powerful at the time. Then his brother, though, as he's in the hospital, in some ways gets a lot more attention because, let's face it, Phil Valentine's radio show, it's a Tennessee, local radio. I think it is syndicated other stations.
Right.
But this guy was not Howard Stern or maybe even Joe Rogan in the podcast world, or,
right.
He's not on Fox News with a national audience every day. So he's got some audience, right?
Yeah.
But his brother then goes on and gets on every national TV show. He's on CNN, he's on Fox, he's on, MSNBC, all these different outlets saying, my brother wants me to help share the message. Everybody should get a vaccine. And when he gets back on the air, he's going to tell you this himself. I mean, I think a lot of us heard that message who never knew who Phil Valentine was.
No, that's the
in before this issue. But then now, unfortunately, he's died of COVID-19 1 month later. He never got out of the hospital to deliver that message. So he never got to speak those words that might have made a bigger difference.
It's not a Rock Hudson moment. It's not a Magic Johnson moment. It's not, we have an elite athlete that got this and that has to live with the damage to his immune system, or he might die over it, or there are the amount of deaths that took place. It's just unsettling to just even ask the question about how the AIDS epidemic was handled versus the coronavirus epidemic. And the Ebola epidemic. Those were all handled very, very differently. I mean, we were all on the Ebola thing. There was one case that got on our shore. We fought the battle there. The whole point of going to Afghanistan, Iraq was to fight terrorism in their country, not to allow it to come to our country. That's not what the former president did. He did not try to fight it on their country. He tried to cost cut. We don't need all those people. Just fire all those people. What are you doing all that research and preventative strategy for a virus? We don't need that.
Oh, you're talking about the pandemic response team at the White House?
Yeah. We don't need that. What do you need that for? There's no mindset to take a look at it. So the thing came to our shore, and it's 640,000 people are have passed on the coronavirus. So our words matter. Our words matter. Too many
people don't really realize how, and I think maybe people do have a understanding that words they say matter, because if they say something, they could stick their foot in the mouth and get in trouble. But people don't understand it enough to study it and get some skill and learn how to make your words really have the impact and matter the way you want them to.
Correct. I mean, the truth literally doesn't matter when it comes to beliefs and perspectives and perceptions. It doesn't matter, because just have a scale of things. Watch how weird this gets really quick. Late 80s, mid 80s, late 80s, AIDS epidemic starts. Till now, 700,000 people.
Wow.
90s, when it really got going, 90s, the 10, 20, 2000, that's 30 years, roughly speaking, 30, 35 years, right?
Right.
Great. 1 year, 630,000 people in the United States have died of coronavirus.
Yeah.
That is the difference. Now, both of those viruses spread and were transmitted differently.
Very differently.
One through sexuality and or blood transfusions. The other one through kind of common cold-like everyday breathing in the same environment things. So it's not a fair comparison because the transmission rate, but the intention is problematic. The effort to prevent it, to care for our fellow American, is not in the same mindset. It's not in the same space. I mean, do you think it would, if the pandemic would have been different if it just killed children under the age of 6? I think our response would be
completely different. Our response would be completely different. All these parents that are anti-mask probably would have been like, everybody's wearing a mask. I mean, I think it's because it's impacted everyone in the country in terms of, I think it's very different. If it was only about the children, parents have a much easier time making a decision for their children.
They do.
Like this, then it wouldn't be seen as much as an American issue of freedom. I mean, it really probably would be similar to how it was with polio in the 1950s. Polio really impacted children more. I mean, there were adults, but disproportionately really impacted children the most. I think the most notable, interestingly, the most notable adult polio patient was President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, although it wasn't really talked about very much. You never saw him in a wheelchair. They were very careful. And of course, he didn't have to be on television every day.
No, he did not.
But now fast forward, wow, what is it? It's literally almost 80 years or so since he took office. And now we have a governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, who's in a wheelchair every day, and that hasn't been an issue. So it shows how much certain things have changed. But anyway, back to polio. When that vaccine became available in the 1950s, every parent in America lined their kids up to get that vaccine because they didn't want their child to be crippled for life, and made their kids get the vaccine. It was not an issue of, well, I want the freedom not to take the vaccine. I want the freedom to be able to catch polio.
So let's take a look at the need for trust and truth together when we look at words. So if I get a sheet of paper, how do I know this sheet of paper has words that are truthful on it versus this other sheet of paper that has truthful on it? How do I know which one of those is? So it's a little hard because I'm looking to read this thing to see how much does it fit my beliefs? How much does it fit my knowledge and wisdom? So if I read a sheet of paper from the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, on the US statistics on HIV, a CDC fact sheet on the HIV AIDS epidemic, if I'm reading that sheet, and how much weight of truth do I get on those numbers? I got to trust the researchers that they're counting the number and the reporting and the stuff, because here it comes, they're kind of required to report that stuff. The doctors are required, the hospitals are required, so that we can keep track of those things. Now I look at the CDC fact sheet for the coronavirus, and I'm looking through a belief structure that has been polluted with other disinformation, less fact information. Now, we can easily turn this to our personal life. We can easily turn this to our business life is, well, this is the data that's being reported by our marketing team. This is the data that's being reported by the sales team. This is the data this is the market research that was done that it proves that this chair is the best chair ever. But who's reporting that data? Are we getting the words, the information that we need? as well as the need for trust so that we can make a decision based on truth. Well, that's unsettling really very, very quickly because it's in the eyes and the ears of the beholder, whether or not it's counted as truthful or not.
So
As
I
I
think
straighten my chair.
you bring up an interesting, reality that I think most of us face every day. I mean, if I'm looking at two pieces of paper and written words on them, I probably make a judgment in the moment as to whether I believe the information or not. And is there any really empirical evidence to make me know that one is truthful and another is not, or that both are
Right.
truthful or both are not? Probably not. But if it is a government document and it has credentials from the Centers for Disease Control, I mean, maybe that raises my level of belief or trust in the information, as long as I don't have specific distrust of that organization. But clearly, a lot of work went into it. But I mean, I'll only speak for myself, Bill. If I read something and I was like, wow, that's really interesting, I wonder how true that is. I actually think that in my mind. I wonder how true that is. And I will go to the source material usually, or do more research and figure out, hey, is there further evidence to support what this paper says? But not everybody really does that.
Not really. No, there's not a secondary question. It's either reject or accept. It's not, and that one is really hard because the reject or accept is based on our already preset bias or belief, or even fallacy that we've created about the reality. So, like, for example, if we take a look at Herman Cain's death of COVID from the Trump rally, do we then try to corkscrew, if I'm a Republican voter, do I corkscrew my belief in saying, well, he could have got it someplace else. He could have got it before he came there. It wasn't really the rally that created the experience. And those things might be true, but you're missing the greater truth. Someone died of coronavirus and either spread it to or got it from that event.
Yeah, we're talking about this Oklahoma rally in 2020. Right. That was much hyped and actually kind of notable because the K-pop fans signed up so many registrants. They thought they were going to have an overflow of attendees to the event.
That's a good
didn't
truth
happen.
piece
So that's
right.
I'm just putting some context for our listeners on what that event was, because we actually talked about that way back, I think, on an episode.
We did. And the main thing here is that if we look at concepts and our words mattering in mediation and communication, we need to hold the mirror up to ourselves and ask if we're coming in with a bias, and be compassionate to our own beliefs that have got us to this stage of the game. At the same time is that we've also got to choose our language forward. So as a person that is the same age as Phil Valentine, do I choose vaccine or not based on a belief that somebody else is telling me? Do I corkscrew my rationale and say, I have a good immune system, I'm probably going to be okay? It's really rare. It's like going into a casino and thinking, oh yeah, this table, I really like that dealer. They smiled at me. They usually don't, but they were dressed nice and they looked good. And I had luck there the last time I was there. We can corkscrew our consciousness into all kinds of beliefs and biases and fallacies in a second. Is Greg Abbott going to get out of the hospital because of the special medicine that he's received that is not fully available to the general population? That's unsettling, because there's a truth in what I just said, not a full reality. Some hospitals have those special medicine, some do not. Some have greater access to it, some do not. Some doctors don't even know about it. Some do. It's hard to stay updated when you're in. It's sort of like, oh yeah, we have this new weapon, but I'm in a battle right now. I just need something that shoots. It's really, we're in a hard spot is what we are. We're in a really hard spot, because I mean, a part of the truth, which is really upsetting, just even having it come out of my mouth, is the virus is going to do its part to change and become stable and become adaptive inside the environment. No one wants to say the following sentence. There's a couple of different versions of the AIDS virus. Huh? No, it's just one thing. It's like, no, it's not.
Well, and I think that most Americans, and actually most people with even basic knowledge of coronavirus in the world, know that there are different variants. And if they really learned how different variants emerge,
right,
or are created,
right,
it's because the virus takes hold in people's bodies,
right,
and learns how to be better at what the virus is trying to do, and that is to attack. So right. Viruses change and mutate, and what people don't seem to know or care is that if we don't get the vast majority of the population vaccinated, there's going to be more variants. And look how bad this Delta thing is. I mean, oh my goodness.
Very, 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 very valuable. So our bodies are making changes towards things. Tom, how often do you need to get a vaccination or a booster for the tetanus virus?
My memory says once every 10 years.
Right. That means that either our immunity is going down or the virus is changing.
Yeah. And you're not invincible in perpetuity.
That there is a process change. And it's like, how often do you need to upgrade your computer?
Oh, yeah.
3 to 5 years, because the thing is evolving and it's changing. We're not taught that as a part of health science. It's a little unsettling, but that's one of the problems that we're actually in, is that the promotion of a wedge issue that has to do with public health is not the space that that should not be a battleground for politicians to use.
That's a really good point. I mean, I'll tell you, we're seeing this play out in Florida, especially, where the governor has aligned himself with freedom and individual rights at the expense of health science.
Right.
And there's quite a battle going on right now with counties in Florida and school districts who are wanting to, and in some cases are defying the governor's executive order to say that you cannot have a mask mandate, to actually mandate masks in schools, especially in the elementary schools where children are too young to get vaccines. This is a battle that's very unsettling, because the governor is choosing something purely political and ideological at the expense of basic human health and safety and protection from the virus.
So the courage that's needed, there's actually a certain amount of courage that's needed. It's called creating an alternative narrative. And the courage that's needed is the show's not about, our podcast is not just about complaining about something. It's about exposing something and then coming up with a solution. So the solution is, you got to create an alternative narrative that impacts the person it has an impact on the person, but also creates the opportunity for the person to leave what that value set is. So for example, if the travel industry or other different businesses of note said, we're not going to do business in the state of Florida over the next over the next year until they clean up their public health issue. Notice I gave it a period of time. We are not doing business over the next year until they clean up their public health issue. Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Microsoft, any brand that has notability, and even the coalition of those brands can put extreme pressure. The travel industry for Florida, the conference, the hotels, we're not doing business there. Now, they're not going to lose all their business, just the way the nation's divided, but they are going to lose 50% of it, over 50%, because that's the way the nation's split right now. And the hotels in Orlando won't like it. The theme parks won't like it. It's like, you got to cut, and all of a sudden the decision we can't run a life here. And then people start migrating out of Florida because there's no work there.
It's really true. I mean, I don't know what percentage of people are avoiding travel to Florida, but I did it. I was supposed to travel to Florida 2 weeks ago on business again. I'm fully vaccinated, but for other reasons, because Florida has become the hottest of hotspots in the United States. I have a young child too young to get the vaccine, and I decided, this is not worth my risk. And, even though I'm protected, I could carry it back or bring it back to her.
That's right.
So I canceled that trip. So it's definitely got to be happening.
It's got to be happening. But for it to have an overt influence or an overt impact, it's got to be more of a public place.
Yes.
And it's the same as the Rock Hudson or the Magic Johnson coming on and saying, hey, I got this thing over here. It's like, yikes, again, really, really problematic.
It is
really, really, it's very, very unsettling. And at one point, it's the scary honesty is that however somebody corkscrews their belief into, and corkscrews their rationale into it, it's very, very unsettling because they're not actually doing truth by numbers. And, I said that recently to another person. It's like, well, why am I vaccinated? Because of the numbers. The numbers are telling me this number, that 92% of people that are vaccinated don't go to the hospital. I'm taking that odd.
Well, and
that's the number.
That is the number. And it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, because there have been a lot of vaccine skeptics who have said, well, the reason and I wonder if they've been using this as an out or if they really believe it. And we're going to find out pretty soon, because what they've been saying is, I'm not taking the vaccine because it's not fully approved by the FDA. It's only under this emergency use authorization. Well, now, actually, the day after we're recording this, then at least according to the New York Times, the FDA is set to give full regulatory approval to the Pfizer coronavirus vaccine tomorrow, the next day from when we're recording this. So if that happens, I wonder if we're all of a sudden going to see another surge in people saying, okay, it's approved, I feel it's safe, I'm not a guinea pig, I'm going to go get the vaccine. It'll be interesting to see.
That will be interesting to see, because it really meets the need for trust and certainty, which is a very powerful need that causes people to be motivated to move into action. And so
what's really sad, Bill, is that we're not seeing people have care for their fellow American.
No, we're not as much. No.
And there's definitely much more of a outcry and vocal advocacy, it seems, for personal freedom than there is to care for your fellow American. It's more of a selfish perspective versus a we, the greater good perspective or attitude.
Yeah.
Isn't there?
There is. And that's the thing, is that it's like you showed me the video of the guy in Tennessee, the father in Tennessee, that was talking about the mask on his kid. He's got a kindergartner.
Yep, 5-year-old who he's sending to school masked in Tennessee, a state
See,
that is not overwhelmingly in support of masks. I'm sort of saying that facetiously. In fact, there's quite a movement to not wear masks.
And his daughter gets it. I'm putting on a mask because I'm caring for others. The kid, and then he says in the interview, he goes, or in the board meeting, it was a school
board meeting. I think
he says he says in a school board meeting is that I understand why some adults don't get this concept. It's like my 5-year-old gets the concept. We put a mask on because we care for others. That's in the Bible. That whole freedom and independence thing you guys are working on isn't, but that caring for others is. And I'm making a joke about it because both of them are important. Freedom, independence, and expressing yourself fully allows me to speak up right now. At the same time, is people are feeling scared and worried and anxious about their health, and then scared and worried and anxious about their freedoms and choices. That's that's the hard part about this. It's you want people to be voluntarily doing this because they care for others, not because that the government told them to. You shouldn't need that next level of rebellion. It's like, because the government told you to, you're not doing it. No, the government is recommending it, and strongly recommending it.
Where was all the outcry from people when the government told them they have to wear a seatbelt when they drive? I mean, that's a law. And I think every state in the union, correct me if I'm wrong, Bill. I think in every state in the union, and the same thing happened with motorcycle helmet laws. There may be 1 or 2 states in the whole union that don't have that, but don't have it. At one point, none of them had it. And where's the outcry of freedom for that? It wasn't to the level, even though I know there was some of it for the helmet law. I think the seatbelt law, less so. I think people get angry if they get pulled over for that and get a ticket. Yeah, but they're not trying to make a huge issue of this. My rights are being oppressed. America's no longer free. And this vaccine is really very similar and probably even has a more direct impact on health and safety of others. Whereas if you don't wear a seatbelt and you get in a car accident, you're probably going to kill yourself. You may not kill others because of not wearing the seatbelt itself.
That's correct.
So I don't know. Anyway, I appreciate your example, because it immediately gets me thinking about headrests behind on the seat of the car. In a car. Yes.
Because that saves 5,000 lives of broken necks
and other injuries too. Yeah, most people think, I've heard people say, why is there a headrest in my car? If I rest my head back and get comfortable and go to sleep, I'm not going to drive well. That's not its purpose. It's called a headrest, but it's easier to call it a headrest than to call it a whiplash protection device.
Protection device. Right.
It's meant you brake and you lean forward, and there's this backlash where your head snaps back. And it if you look at any car from the 50s and even early 60s that didn't have them.
Oh my gosh.
And antique cars, beautiful cars. Oh, I'd love to have that car. I'm telling you what, I don't know that I would really drive that car a whole lot without having that, because
that's the point. That's right. Now you can do it in retrospect, but see the way the vaccine, now that I'm thinking about it creatively, as kind of like my marketing brain is coming into here, it's that if the vaccine's narrative shifted to, listen, a vaccine is like an airbag in the car. You take the vaccine so that in case you run into the virus, the vaccine goes off and provides you protection so you don't go to the hospital and die. If you don't have a vaccine, it's like not having an airbag in the car. The chances of you going through the windshield or hitting your head and having more damage or hurting your neck or dying is higher. It's more like an airbag. So doesn't it make sense to have an airbag that through the vaccine? Doesn't that? And if that message was populated and the person's belief it's getting it to be associated with something they already know, rather than being peeled off as a political piece based on freedom and independence and identity, which it kind of isn't. It's like we're just trying to provide protection, and it doesn't mean you're not going to get hurt.
Right. And it doesn't mean you're not going to get sick if you get the vaccine. You
That's
might get
correct.
sick,
You
but
might
I'm
get
not
sick.
going to end up in the hospital, and I am not going to die. That's the real,
So there's messaging problems, and I really, just to tip my hat to, people that write in about this show. Somebody said, Bill, you're really pro-vaccine. We don't have the long-term consequences. And I go, yeah, but I'm thinking to myself, yeah, but we also don't have the long-term consequences of an airbag. When they first came out, we never had the long-term consequences, and they had to adjust the airbags at the beginning because they were too strong coming out too soon, or we had to adjust because a child died because they were in the front seat, and they had to have a warning: don't put a kid under 12 in your front seat, because the airbag, if it goes off, the kid's too small and the airbag will, hurt them, kill them if you put them there. They got to be in the back seat. There is a learning process as human beings do something new. And it's just, what are the numbers showing us, and where is that going to take us? And
Well,
having a solution is creating an alternative narrative that is going to be away from the separate political narrative that's taking place.
agreed, Bill. And I appreciate your example of the airbag. And I understand people's skepticism about a vaccine that was created in such a very short period of time and has not had a decade of testing. I completely understand and respect that.
Absolutely.
But if you do dig into it in detail, you'll find all the numbers that exist. And of course, remember, there are more numbers being tallied every day around this vaccine with, recently we had a surge in vaccines again, and there was another day where we had more than 1 million people vaccinated in this country.
Yeah.
And so from not only all the trials that were done before even the emergency use authorization, but now the numbers of people that are not going into the hospital who have the vaccine and all the numbers are supporting these vaccines in the right direction. And if you also do some research on why they were able to develop these mRNA vaccines, in particular, the Moderna and the Pfizer, if you look into why they were able to do that so quickly, you realize these vaccines were in development for more than a decade, just not specifically tuned to COVID-19.
I see.
And so there actually is a lot more history than you might have been led to believe.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So
this is really good. I think that, one of the things, this individualism versus cooperation is a topic we can pick up next time. And
I like
because
that.
our individualism has to do one thing and our cooperation has to do one thing. And the way our truth meter hooks to either a cooperation narrative or an individualism narrative can be really helpful for us personally. Are we more tilting towards cooperation, or are we more tilting toward individualism? Well, if we're tilting towards cooperation, we might say, well, who are the people that are closest to us need support? And then we make a decision in that direction. If we're towards individualism, it's like, hey, they got to take care of themselves and it's up to them in their world. And, that's up to them. So there's a personal piece to it. There is a business piece to it, and there's a government piece to it, because all those things have got to collaborate with each other. They can't be done in isolation, although that's the way it's been, done in the past. And now we've got to upgrade the way we think and the way we do things and make our changes. We need to adapt to the language of our current environment, because words do make a difference. They just do.
I agree, Bill. They do. Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate it. I want to remind our listeners that we're going to have links to some of the things we talked about in this episode on the blog post at purchasingtruth.com, which means the story about Phil Valentine and his death, the unfortunate death there, as well as the video of that Tennessee father speaking at the school board meeting that Bill referenced. So I'll always know anything we talk about and reference, you can get there.
Yep. Yeah.
All
Thanks
right.
everybody for listening. It's been a great show. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this Purchasing Truth podcast. We trust that you have enjoyed this engaging and thought-provoking conversation. Our hope is that you've received value, found clarity, and broadened your truth perspective in this episode. If you did, leave us a review or visit our website, purchasingtruth.com. Join us again for another informative and content-rich discussion here at the Purchasing Truth podcast. Don't just accept whatever information comes your way. Join the discussion. Discover your own voice. Purchase your own truth.